All right, so today we are diving into the future of the Philippines.
Okay.
You guys sent us this interview with Ramon Ang,
Yeah.
the head of San Miguel Corporation.
Right.
And you want us to really kind of unpack his vision for where the country's going.
Yeah.
And I got to say, it's a pretty ambitious vision.
It is.
A lot of it's centered around infrastructure.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I think for a long time when people thought of San Miguel, they thought mostly of food and beverage, right? Like
Totally.
San Miguel beer,
Yeah.
all those
Yeah.
kinds of iconic Filipino products.
Right, definitely.
But under Ramon Ang's leadership, they've really pivoted to infrastructure in a big way.
Yeah, and he really lays out in this interview why he thinks that's so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
He sees these sort of 5 big problems that he's identified in the Philippines
Okay.
that he thinks are holding the country back.
And what are those?
He talks about the traffic,
Oh, yeah.
obviously a big one.
Everyone knows about Manila traffic.
The airport situation, which we've all probably experienced, the flooding,
Okay.
the rising cost of food,
Yeah.
and unreliable electricity.
Right. So these are some pretty major issues that a lot of Filipinos are facing on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And he's connecting that back to infrastructure.
Yes, and his argument is that infrastructure is essentially the key
Okay.
to solving all of these problems.
Interesting. Okay.
So, he talks about things like we need better roads and highways
Right.
to ease the traffic congestion. We need these flood control projects to mitigate the damage from these,
Yeah.
heavier and heavier rains that we're seeing.
Mm.
Of course, the new airport is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And then, even things like food security.
Right.
He's connecting back to this idea that we need to build a stronger base
Interesting.
for the country.
So he's not just throwing out these problems. He's actually saying, here's what we're going to do about it.
Exactly. And he goes straight into solutions.
Okay.
He's talking about major expansions to the Skyway,
Mm-hmm.
huge cleanup efforts happening in the Pasig River.
Right.
And then, of course, that brand new airport in Bulacan that everybody's talking about.
Yeah, this is not just talk. This is concrete and steel. He's putting his money where his mouth is.
And that's what I think is so interesting about this interview. And he talks about these projects like they're already well underway.
Yeah, it's not just a pipe dream. It seems like he's really moving on this stuff.
It's not just like a wish list.
Right.
These are things that he is actively working on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not just about corporate social responsibility, which a lot of companies do, kind of as a side thing.
Right, right.
He sees this as San Miguel becoming almost like an engine for national development.
Yeah.
He uses this phrase, public good.
Yeah.
He feels a responsibility, he says, to balance profit with public good.
It's a really bold statement.
It is, and it makes you wonder, can one company really shoulder that much responsibility?
It's a huge undertaking.
It is.
Okay, so we're talking about this grand vision for the Philippines, but how does this actually translate? Rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
How does this improve the lives of everyday Filipinos?
Right, so let's take traffic, for example.
Okay.
I mean, we've all been stuck in those Manila traffic jams.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like a rite of passage, right?
Brutal.
It's not just an inconvenience, though. It actually impacts people's lives.
Right.
Lost productivity, stress levels, all of that.
Absolutely.
And Ang's talking about really expanding those highways,
Right.
making them wider, more efficient, trying to ease some of that congestion.
Okay, and then how about the flooding? Because, it seems like every time it rains,
Yeah.
certain parts of Manila just get slammed.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge issue. And that's where this whole Pasig River cleanup comes in.
Right.
It's not just about making the river look nice.
Yeah.
He's arguing that by improving the flow of the river,
Okay.
they can actually reduce the risk of flooding.
So it's a 2-for-1.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautification and flood control.
Makes sense. And then,
Yeah.
of course, the airport NAIA. We all know flying in and out of there can
It's
be
an adventure.
Yeah.
An experience.
But Ang is talking about like a complete overhaul.
Okay.
New terminals,
Yep.
better runways, even like removing this traffic circle that he says is causing all these bottlenecks.
Mm.
Really streamlining the whole experience, making it more efficient for travelers.
It sounds good in theory, but I got to say there's been a lot of skepticism about this NAIA renovation.
Yeah, understandably.
People are wondering, can it really be done efficiently? Can it be done on schedule?
Right. Is this just another big project that's going to get bogged down?
And then there's the whole issue with the price tag.
Right. Everyone's worried about these potential price hikes for travelers.
Right. Like, are we going to have to pay for all these improvements?
Yeah, exactly. And nobody wants to hear that.
Especially when you're already paying a lot to fly.
Yeah. So Ang actually addresses this head on in the interview.
Okay, what does he say?
Well, first he points out that a lot of the work was already underway before San Miguel even got involved.
Okay, so it's not like they're starting from scratch. Right, exactly. And then in terms of the cost, he says that the rates they're looking at are actually in line with global standards. He's basically saying, look, if you want a world-class airport, it's going to cost money.
So he's acknowledging that there will be some upfront costs, but
Betting on those long-term benefits.
right, that eventually it'll pay off.
Yeah, that's the game.
And it's not just airports and highways, right?
Right?
He's talking about food security, too.
Yeah, he really seems to be banking on San Miguel's expansion into agriculture on a big scale.
Yeah, what's the deal with these mega poultry farms he's talking about?
They're huge. I mean, we're talking something like 80 million birds.
80 million. That's a lot of chicken.
It's mind-boggling, and it's not just chicken. He's talking about ramping up production of rice corn fish, all the staples of the Filipino diet.
So the thinking is, if they can increase the supply of these essential foods, prices should go down.
Exactly. It's classic supply and demand. It's a bold strategy, to say the least.
It is, and it makes you wonder, I mean, can they actually pull it off on that scale?
That's the million-dollar question, right? I mean, it's a massive undertaking.
It is.
But it does speak to his overall approach, which seems to be identify a problem, throw a ton of resources at it, and hopefully it goes away.
Right. And throughout this whole interview, he's remarkably optimistic about the future of the Philippines.
Yeah.
Like, he really seems to believe that things are going to be drastically different by 2028.
He paints a rosy picture.
He does. But is it realistic?
Well, and that's the thing, right? What happens after President Marcos is this whole vision tied to the current administration.
Yeah. Is it sustainable in the long run?
Right. And to be fair to Ang, he does say this can't be a one-man show.
Okay.
He talks about how important it is for the private sector and the government to keep working together.
Collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He praises Marcos's hands-on approach, but he stresses that this has to be a sustained effort regardless of who's in power.
So he really sees this as like a fundamental shift
Yeah.
in how things are done.
It's about changing the game completely.
And he seems to believe that Filipinos are ready for that change.
He talks about how patient they've been, how much they've endured, but that they're eager to see real tangible improvements. And he believes those improvements are coming.
It's a powerful message of hope, for sure.
It is. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of all these big projects.
Right.
But the real test is in the execution, right?
Absolutely.
Will this actually translate into a better life for everyday Filipinos?
That's the ultimate question.
Yeah.
And I think it's something we'll have to keep revisiting as things unfold.
Definitely a lot to think about.
There is. But that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
All right. Until next time.